Hi, my name is Willie, and today we're going to be going over this poor old Sears that has been worked on by I'm going to call it a butcher shop. Okay, now I went to take the air filter cover and already noticed that one of these screws are missing because only this one was in here. And there's supposed to be two of these and there's only one, so that's one issue I noticed right off the bat. I also had noticed that they stuck the wrong spark plugs in here. It's hard to see, but you can actually see that darker spot on the bottom half of the spark plug was actually sticking into the cylinder. This is a flathead that requires a shorter spark plugs. This isn't even the right spark plug. I'm not sure if that's correct from when I had taken it out or if it might have been forced in, but yeah. These are usually for overhead valve engines, not flatheads. So one more chalk for the wrong kind of repair. I go take these screws out, and 3 of these 4 screws were loose. They weren't even tight. That's another strike 3. You're out. You suck. You shouldn't be working on this stuff. But the nonsense continues on. Okay, I was in here and I noticed that this vent tube is loose. This really should be replaced. I mean, this is early 90s. It's old. And I go and take a look at this carburetor, and it looks like a Chinese carburetor to me. The fuel line is all original to the back. It was never replaced. So that's another strike on their part, because if you're going to replace a carburetor, you got to drain that tank. And if they never replace the fuel line, they never drain that tank. And that bushing sits up about a ½ inch. So all of that junk right here is the, right there's the tank bushing. So that bottom half of that tank is going to have all that junk in there that probably has been causing problems on the original carburetor. They never drained that tank. Not to mention that bushing is from the 90s. Why not replace it? Upsell them if you're going to do it. I mean, it's cheap assurance and you know your carburetor's going to be good. And it looks like they at least replaced the fuel filter. But then I get even further into it and I notice that that's not even connected. That's not even the right hardware. How in the world is that thing supposed to stay in there? It's just... It should have a plastic bracket like that to clip it in place, and it doesn't. So, another problem, okay, another issue. I mean, one issue after another, and look at this. That's from the fuel pump. It's not even tight. The fitting into the fuel pump isn't even tight on this thing, on either side. It's like, really? And, I'm going to probably service the valves while I'm in here, and unless the compression test comes good. I haven't cranked it over by hand yet to see what the blow-by would feel like, but whoever's been working on this thing, man, they should not be working on tractors. They should be investing in repair manuals and reading. But in other news, it looks like the oil's been changed at least. So, what I'm guessing probably happened is the original carburetor probably dumped... or probably had a leaking seat, and instead of just rebuilding the carburetor, they put this POS on here. So I'm going to continue on and see what other kind of problems... Oh, they even sent this thing without a bolt in the seat, so the whole seat was just spinning on here, loose, nothing holding it. That's a safety hazard even. Just horrible work whoever did it, and they never even greased the steering on this thing. This steering is as stiff as can be. You can barely turn it even when you're not even sitting on it. So I made a deal with the person that owns this thing. I'm going to service it, and he gave me the opportunity of buying this hitch first, so I'm going to take this rear sleeve hitch off and service this whole tractor and take it back to him and get my collateral back for it, plus parts, whatever the parts costs. I'm not charging labor or shipping, but man, this thing is in quite the state. I'm hoping I can straighten this out with what I have. Here. Instead of having to buy hardware, I'm hoping I can, where's that one piece? I'm hoping I can probably put this piece on here. Drill a hole to stick this plastic bushing in and clip that on, but we'll see. So, gonna continue on. I'll keep you posted if I find more issues. I'm sure there's going to be somewhere or another. I haven't even checked the belts on this thing yet. And the lights were missing on this when the owner had bought it. Or the previous owner, whatever. So, let's continue on. Well, I got a little bit further into the Kohler engine. I was getting ready to order some gaskets. I was going to get the valve cover gaskets because it looked like they were leaking. And I pulled the fuel pump off to take the look at the fuel pump. Found some junk in the fuel pump reed valve, which was causing the fuel pump not to pump. And before ordering the parts, I wanted to run a compression test on it. And that cylinder was good. This cylinder had no compression in it. And this is also the cylinder that had a wet spark plug when I had initially gone to go see this thing. And this is another fine example of why I don't like Kohler engines whatsoever. Every single Kohler I've ever had has cost me money. Okay, I had a 10 horsepower from the 60s that needed a new piston and a bore. Then I had this 12 horsepower that needed a new carburetor, points and condenser, and some gaskets. I had a V-twin Command that the crankshaft was binding up on that needs to be torn apart and checked out someday. I have that crass one, which I had on other videos, that had an oil leak and needed a carburetor and bolts were snapping off on it. And that was going to cost me a bunch of money to fix. It wasn't worth fixing that. And now I get to this one, which I was taking a look to see why it wasn't starting, and I found out the fuel pump wasn't pumping, so there was nothing in the carburetor. But the last thing I was expecting was a cylinder that with a stationary piston in it. So I've never had any luck with Kohler engines whatsoever. I have another Kohler generator that the rod bearings had seized up on. I think that's because we had never changed the oil filter on it, and I think the sludge had plugged that up. And then there's another Kohler opposed twin that has seized valves from rainwater getting down in the exhaust valves. So, just every single Kohler I've ever had has needed so much dang work, it's not even funny. It's like, I don't even know if I want to waste my time with Kohlers ever again. And then, even then, I've had to work on Kohler Courage engines. And they're junk, too. So, there's another engine that's going to be rebuilt. This is pretty funny. I have to see if I can't find the parts for this thing. You're going to laugh when you see this thing. This had a bad head gasket and a corroded out cylinder. But you should see what happened to the rod on this thing. I got to find it. Hang on. This thing had spun a rod, and it literally charred the oil off of it. It got so hot. You can see it's actually melted and deformed. The bolt studs aren't even parallel anymore. And it actually burnt the crankshaft blue. And as you can see, like the wrist pin's a little stiff on this one. But one of these actually had a completely seized. That wrist pin isn't even moving. It's just stuck. Camshaft for that same cylinder that had lost the rod or the bearing also had a bad lobe on the camshaft. The crankshaft is junk, which I'm not sure exactly where that's at, but the crankshaft actually got burned blue, and the oil had actually charred to the crankshaft when that rod had gone bad. It's the first time we've ever seen that. Even one of the rod cap bolts was only held on by like a little over 2 turns before the threads would have let go and probably toasted the block, which is only aluminum. There's your sad news for the day. We'll have this thing rebuilt before too long. I got a crankshaft ordered in for that. But yeah, heck of a day. Like, oh sure, we'll check it out, we'll fix it. No start situation. Never assume the block is any good. So I'm not going to ask for any thumbs up on this one. If you want to add any comments down below as to how wrong I am about Kohlers not being any good, give me some stories of how many Kohlers you've had that are good. Have you bought a dozen Kohlers and every single one of them was perfect? Or have you bought 5 of them and every single one of them were toast? I'm kind of curious. But there you go. I'm going to end it here. See you on the next one. Bye.